some our new councillors may not have met. Brent is about 5 or 10 minutes away, but if I just get each of the people who are with me to introduce themselves to you, let them know the role that they fill here at council, how long they've been here, and anything else of interest. First up in the beauty pageant, Mike.
Kia ora, councillors. I've been here at WRC for 7 years. My role here is science manager, and I've had the great pleasure of sitting in this room quite a few times in the last few years. And I guess in terms of the topic today, PC1, I got involved in PC1 before it started its formal process, I think, back when I was working in Dairy NZ, when we formed the Waikato Dairy Leaders Group to ensure the dairy industry had a good voice, strong voice in the process. So, yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Mike, and congratulations on your 7-year anniversary, which I believe is only a day or two gone. So, yeah. Tracy, introduction and number of years you've been here?
I came 14 years ago next month for 12 months. And yeah, can't get rid of me yet. Yeah. I love it. Bruce.
Right hand. Yep.
Sorry. Afternoon, councillors. My name's Bruce McAuliffe. I'm the manager of the Resource Management Policy section. So I've been here, feels like forever, probably is, 37 years. I started with the Waikato Catchment Board originally, so I've been here a very long time. So my team is the team that writes the policy and the plans. So we currently, we've been preparing the proposed regional coastal plan, which has gone out for appeals, and it's my team that's preparing the freshwater policy review, and I've been managing the PC1 process from an overall management perspective. It was my staff that were Earl Trabilko, when he was here, was sort of managing the was running the appeals process or doing the negotiation from the policy perspective. So that's my role. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Oh, that was good timing. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Just one of my very important staff members is just celebrating 20 years of service to the council. So Chris and I are celebrating that huge achievement. So Brent Sinclair, I know most of you have a number of years with the council. In 5 days' time, it'll be 28. Somebody told me the other day that I'm getting close to the point where half my life has been servicing the Waikato community. So, involvement with Plan Change 1, fundamentally because, as you know, the Resource Use Directorate implements whatever planning documents come through. Our advice through that process is about implementability. So things like when the plan was being put in place around consenting, we would go forward and say, well, you're going to need to schedule, if you want this number of people to have consent, you're going to need to schedule in a way that's implementable. And that's why you'll see that one of the things that's coming out of this is a time frame which I think is over 5-6 years, Hamish. So that makes it implementable. When they'll sometimes people write rules in a way that they have an idea of what they're trying to achieve, but the words don't quite work. And so that's where my team comes in to say, if you're trying to achieve this outcome, then the words you need to write need to be this way, because that is how, that's something that you can clearly, it has to be really clearly understandable for the regulated party and for the regulator. So you can't have rules further down the track where people are trying to say, well, what does that mean? So that's where the implementation team is involved, both, and then that's the same thing through the court appeal process when the appellants have been talking with the policy folk around what might change. They will ask us, how is that something that can be implemented? So that's, we don't get into the kind of the policy merits, it's more about something able to be implemented. So that's me.
Kia ora, everyone. Kia ora, everyone. My name's Hamish Smith. I'm a principal advisor in the primary industry engagement team. I've been, as Brent touched on, in terms of implementation, I've been the, I guess, the conduit between the policy process and implementation through this process. In terms of how long I've been here, coming up to 15 years, and had some sort of degree of involvement with PC1 since just prior to its inception, for quite some time now.
Good afternoon. I'm Blair Keenan. I'm the principal economist here. My role, I guess, is to support these guys in trying to understand the economic implications of their work. I guess I've been on my way home back to Otago for 15 years now. I've paused here for a while. Yep.
Thanks, Blair. Just before we get underway, Tracy, obviously understand that this is a fairly hot topic for a number of us in the room. So, councillors, I would request you please show some respect. We're here to understand PC1 from the staff side of things and in that space. So please, we're talking to the subject, not personalities. I don't want to see that going down, and I will knock that on the head if I see it happening. And then the other thing, Tracy, just around the structure, do you want to go through pieces and wait for questions, or do you want questions to pop up as you work your way through it?
I think
Entirely in your hands.
there'll be some natural junctures in the presentation. So I do want to spend about 10 minutes talking about how we got there. Just before I respond, we've also got Tracy Nelson over there, sitting there very quietly. Tracy, did you just want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tracy Nelson. I am the Primary Industry Engagement Manager. I joined Council 3.5 years ago to develop the newly created section. Our section is all about supporting landowners to meet their regulatory obligations. So a big focus for the last 3.5 years has been on Plan Change 1 and freshwater farm plans.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, and thanks, Warren. Look, I do just want to make a couple of opening comments just following on from yourself. We do have some staff here who are presently still, I would say, under instruction from the court. So this is purposefully a publicly open workshop. There's nothing here that is publicly excluded, but obviously matters before the court we will not be going into in detail. And if I kind of feel as though we're straying into that, I'll call it. It is information sharing. We're not here to make any decisions. So just Noel, in reference to the legal advice that was circulated around as a workshop making decisions, I just want to be clear for everybody that it is the information sharing. For me, one of the key reasons for having this is we understand and we do truly understand the significance of Plan Change 1. We understand there are a lot of questions out there. We understand there's a lot of misinformation out there. So for me, it's really an opportunity to understand what all those questions are. What are those questions you're being asked? What have you heard? Because some of it is true, some of it isn't true. And for me, it's really important that we arm you with the right information to respond to that. As I said, we still have matters before the court. We are still working on that, and our staff are, while they're employed by WRC, they are still officers of the court. So, look, we will want the conversation to go to as many places as it possibly can, but if it's straying too far, then we'll just make the call. In terms of the presentation, got a bunch of slides. We'll see if we get through those or not, but there will be some natural junctures, I think, to stop and respond to questions. So I'll be the ringmaster, and I will throw to others if it's too tricky for me, or others who know far more about certain parts of Plan Change 1 than I do. For those of you wanting to know what the unicorn is, this is the unicorn. This is Plan Change 1. If anybody would like a copy, and I think this version is a May version, which has strike through. It is not the final version. but it has enough in there to confuse you, is how I would frame it up, because there's a lot in here. What's really telling, and this is a strike through version, so we put out a version, everyone has a comment, it gets changed. What's really telling is the objectives, the majority of the objectives and policies, the reason why, have had a little bit of change, not much. The guts of it is the how, is the rules, is the how we're going to do this, how's the team going to implement it, what does that look like? So there's an awful lot involved and invested from the entire region in this document. But this is the unicorn. That's it. And it's quite underwhelming when you think it's a decade plus long process. But it is also a process, 29, it is also a process that is setting up the next 80 years. So whilst it looks fairly insignificant, it is hideously significant for all of us. We're all ratepayers, we're all landowners. Some of us are farmers, some grow vegetables, some are in the urban area. Every single person in the catchment from Taupo down to Port Waikato, including Waipa, is affected by this. We haven't taken it lightly. And Geordie, you'll be my lovely assistant. So if we can just click through, Jordan, the process today. So we did send the workshop memo out, and I know not everybody loves reading, so we did make sure that we highlighted the key points for you. So if you just wanted the cheat sheet with the workshop that we always run, have a look in the grey boxes. Somebody did tell me one of our new elected members is colourblind, so I didn't go crazy with colour, I stuck with grey. And as we talked about yesterday, shades of grey. So these are the reasons for embarking on Plan Change 1. It wasn't something that our councillors sat in a chamber and said, oh, we've got nothing to do, let's do something. There was a statutory requirement for every regional council in the country to start this. Ours is the most significant. When I say we, and I'm talking about our councillors, because councillors made the decision, led by Chief Executive Bob Lang and Chair Peter Buckley, to embark on this process. We said, let's do the whole catchment. Other areas in the country were doing it by sub-catchments, and they ended up into a rolling process of that. We had conversation this morning when Marley was taking you through significant bits of treaty legislation. The River Settlement iwi legislation we know is enshrined Te Ture Whai Mana, which is the vision and strategy in legislation. That provided an imperative. We had, and Brent reminded you yesterday, we still have an incredibly permissive approach in our regional plan, one of the most permissive in the country, to activities that can be undertaken. And we came under significant scrutiny in the early 2010s and the late 2000s around the pine to pasture conversions in the upper catchment. And people really sending this council a signal. I know Chris at the time went down to central government to talk to a select committee because there was going to be a moratorium imposed. So the tool to address that issue was a regional plan. We also had the Office of the Auditor General show an unnatural interest in how we manage freshwater over those 4 years there, but in 2011. And last but not least, we had evidence of declining water quality. Thanks, Geordie. And we'll circulate a copy of this PowerPoint for those, so you won't have to take buckets notes. There's a statutory planning framework. I'm not going to labour that because we know that's all going to change in about a month. But there is, again, yesterday we talked about core functions of council. Making plans and policies is a core function. We can't get away from it. It must be complied with. And also Marley took you through the JMA obligations that are unique to the Waikato Waipa catchment. Thanks, Geordie. Te Ture Whai Mana, again, Marley highlighted some of this, but it is different for the Waikato Waipa catchments than any other catchment. Te Ture Whai Mana, the vision and strategy, is the primary direction setting document. If there is any inconsistency between the vision and strategy and a national policy statement, any national policy statement, or an RMA document, then the vision and strategy prevails. Once we got to notification, we had the Five River iwi and the Waikato River Authority say that they supported the notification of the plan as it gave effect to Te Ture Whaimana. That wasn't an insignificant hurdle to jump through. Thanks, Geordie. Mike, thought you might just want to do a quick Science 101.
Just a couple of very quick slides. So Te Ture Whaimana, as you know, has a range of objectives, and one of those is that the river is safe to swim in and to take food from over its entire length. So this was, I guess, one of those the core values that went into Plan Change 1 was around driving improvements in water quality for swimming. And this slide just summarises across the monitoring sites within the Waikato Waipa. So these are the tributary sites rather than the main stem. Just highlighting those that are above the line or in red are all those that fail to meet swimming water quality standards. So highlighting that that is a particular issue as it relates to Te Ture Whaimana and a key objective for Plan Change 1. Next one, Jordan. Apologies, the maps on the right showing trends in water quality, probably hard to see, but particularly for those who are colourblind. But the key points here is that over that period from 1991 to 2020, we saw trends in water quality across the region. It's important to note that we saw a mix of improving trends and deteriorating trends. For example, ammonia levels across the region have decreased, and ammonia is a good indicator of point source discharges. And so things like wastewater treatment, dairy shed effluent management, those are the sorts of things that will have driven the improvements in ammonia. What we have seen over that period, what we did see over that period was in a large part of the region, increases in nitrogen. That tends to be, when we look right across the country, increasing trends in nitrogen tend to follow land use intensification. And we know that, particularly in the Upper Waikato, we were seeing land use intensification with pine to pasture conversions. So as Tracy said, previous regional plans had limited controls on intensification. And again, that was a key part of Plan Change 1. I just wanted to highlight, so often this is a key question people want to know, which is, well, where are the contaminants coming from? And this work done several years ago now by Bill Vant, who was one of our senior water quality scientists, since retired. But it identifies that when we look at land use as a contributor to both nitrogen and phosphorus in the Waikato River catchment, we see land use, so that's a mix of farming, horticulture, urban and pine forest land uses. That contributes about 60% of the total nitrogen loading in the river. And for phosphorus, it's quite a bit less, 35%. So human land use within the catchment is a primary source of the contaminants that PC1 is concerned with. So this was just, I guess, a couple of summary points. So we've seen an increased scale and intensity of farming, and there's a whole raft of material that was presented in our State of the Environment report a couple of years ago now to back that up. So we've seen that increased scale and intensity. It's increased pressure on freshwater ecosystems, including some of those signals that I showed about the rivers not meeting the community's required standards. And PC1 is seeking to address that increasing pressure from farming through controls on both intensification but also on the loss of contaminants, the four main contaminants, nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and E. coli from farms into waterways. Thank you.
Jordan. This is just a quick snapshot of the project structure, so how things were set up to craft the plan change. So the technical alliance, the evidence base, the group that got together. There are requirements through the river legislation and JMAs and through co-governance requirements, and then through to council. Council was the ultimate decision maker, and that was based on a recommendation up from Waiora Committee, which was a unanimous recommendation. If there was something that wasn't agreed, and there were two things throughout the entire process that went up to council, council sent it back to the Healthy Rivers Waiora Committee to work on. Next slide, Geordie. Those around the table, there were 24 members around the table that spent an inordinate amount of time crafting the plan change. This was based on a council decision. Staff were all set to do a traditional plan change where effectively staff hold the pen, we work with councillors, we go out, have a couple of rounds of conversations with people, generate a plan change. This was a purposeful, at the time, a lot of people were going through these processes where those impacted most were those who wrote the plan change. Now, all but the community and Māori interest seats were nominated by the sectors, and they had a responsibility to go back and talk with the sectors. There were the sector nominations and alternates who sat around the table. So there were some pretty tough conversations around that table, as you'd anticipate, because it's a really complex matter. Thanks, Geordie. Part of the conversation, the information that was fed in was the economic assessment and the scenario modelling. Blair, did you want to overview this? This was all done independently by Graham Dill from the University of Waikato and also from Market Economics. Did you just want to do the higher points?
Yep, sure. So the two-pronged approach that it describes up there, the first one's kind of trying to capture the work that Graham Dill did, which was, it was an integrated modelling approach that started with model farm systems that were developed by kind of a wider group of experts. And essentially what it did was to, for each of the model farm systems, there was a schedule of mitigations that were modelled. And so it's quite a complicated modelling approach with thousands of lines of code. But in short, what it did was it would run through an algorithm that tried to pick the cheapest of the options until you got to the objective that you were trying to achieve. And it did this across all the different landscapes, across all the different subcatchments. The second part of it, the second bullet point under the two-pronged approach, was an input-output modelling approach, which was designed to meet section 32(2) of the RMA, which says you need to understand the economic impact on economic growth and employment. So that looked at the effect of different sectors and kind of the downstream effects of changes in land use. So essentially the point was to say, given the objective that you're trying to achieve, what's the best, most economically efficient way of doing it? What it did show was that with all the mitigations that had been modelled and built in, if you implemented all of that everywhere, that wasn't enough to get you to where the objectives had been stated. So this was, I guess that's where the idea that Plan Change 1 was a step in the direction that you needed to get to, but it would leave to future plan changes how to get the rest of the way. And I guess a third prong, which isn't really mentioned there because it's not strictly economics, I guess, there was an integrated assessment, which it's a much more informal sort of thing, because the thing that none of this modelling tells you is what the benefits of the plan change were. So if you're trying to balance up the costs and benefits, none of the modelling tells you what that looks like. So there was a third piece of work, an integrated assessment. There was a lot less resource put into that than the economic modelling part, but that was trying to at least describe what that might look like.
Thanks, Geordie. We'll crack on. There's 3 slides here that just provides an overview of Plan Change 1, what it does, how it's clicked together and what it's trying to achieve. I guess for me, the most important bullet point is the bottom one, that it does take a risk-based approach, that it is very much focused on a continuum of consenting types from permissive up to most stringent based on the impact of the activity. Here's getting a bit more into the nuts and bolts, and if you've got questions around the nuts and bolts, as I said, we will answer those at the appropriate level that we can at a public workshop. We won't be going into details clause by clause or even where we're at in the Environment Court discussions, but this is essentially the jigsaw puzzle or the Lego set of Plan Change 1 as it clicks together. Plan Change 1 also does put some responsibility on municipal and industrial point source discharges. Thanks, Geordie. If you could go to the next slide, sorry. And there are also some provisions around the term tangata whenua ancestral land, enabling development on Māori-owned land that previously hasn't been able to be developed before because of legal impediments, and also recognition and provision for the Whangamarino wetland. So the Whangamarino wetland we know is very important. It's one of 7 wetlands, someone will correct me, 7 wetlands in the country that are identified as being of international significance. We have 3 of those in our region, the Firth of Thames, the Kapuatai Peak Dome area and Whangamarino. The other areas are, I'm going to say, Awarua Lagoon in South Island, and 2 others that Mike and I will get back to you on. I suspect one, no, I'm not even going to guess. The most important thing is 3 of the 7 are in the Waikato, and one of those 3 is Whangamarino wetland, and as such, again, an international convention that governments sign us up to, we need to recognise it. Thanks, Geordie. So that is about 6 years done in 10 minutes. Where that takes us is to the Environment Court process. Now, once the Plan Council made the decision to notify the plan, so the plan developed by that collaborative group, endorsed by the Waiora Committee, Council decided in September, 16th of September 2016, there are some things that are etched in your brain, to notify that plan. We had that meeting out at Karapiro, and it was incredibly well attended by a lot of people who potentially were impacted by the plan. Once that's notified, it becomes Council's plan and submissions are called for. We received around 1,000 submissions. They were heard. Council appointed an independent hearings panel. Each of those people who sat on the hearings panel were independent. There were no councillors on that. That went through a contestable process with one of the members. It was very important to this council that one of the members understood farming, was a farmer. I think Basil was a farmer at the time, so Basil Morrison, for those who know Basil, and somebody who could understand farming systems and talk farming to people who were turning up to the hearing, making submissions from a farming perspective. Because there were lots of technical submissions, but it was really important to this council that there was someone who talked farming. So Basil was on that. We also had RMA lawyers, RMA professionals, freshwater ecologists, and somebody who's now an Environment Court judge from a Mātauranga Māori and legal perspective. That panel gave council, they were fully delegated the authority to make the recommendations. They recommended those to council. Council then adopted that plan as its own. So when people start talking about the plan belongs to somebody else, it belongs to this council. We adopted that plan. That then went to appeal and we received 24 appeals. The day an appeal was lodged, the process went out of council's hands. The decision maker from then on is the Environment Court, and we must do as the Environment Court directs us as an entity and individual staff once the court determines what the process was. In the middle of the process, we had COVID, and we understood that people operating in the catchment weren't really caring about Plan Change 1 at the moment. They were caring about COVID. So we supported a direction sought by Federated Farmers to extend the minimum appeal period time, one, the complexity of Plan Change 1, and the time the country was going through by up to 6 months. So council supported that. I think at the time we didn't say up to 6 months. We were prepared to go to 4. The court made the determination to go up to 6 months. So right from the start, we wanted to be working as much as possible with the appellants. The court then directed a whole lot of mediation to see if we could narrow the points. So there were 1,000 submission points. Those mediations probably took between 8 and 10 months, Bruce. Nobody budged. So we were trying to work positions. The most constructive through those mediations were Federated Farmers, led by at the time by Paul Lemire, who subsequently went to our dry stock sector, and Dairy NZ. So they were really trying to find solutions. Unfortunately, when you've got all the appellants around the table as directed by the court, we didn't make any headway. So then we tootled off to court. Mike, Brent, Bruce, Hamish, Blair, myself all had a little bit of time in court where we signed the Code of Conduct for expert witnesses, and the court tells you what to do. They don't employ you though. WRC still employs you, but you get told what to do by the court. Where we are at the moment, and Geordie, I think if you can, I've put a few slides in here about some of the comments that came from the interim decision of the court. We just scoot through those, Geordies, because I have sent the slides out to councillors. Next one, next one, next one, next one. So this is the environment, oh, go back one. This is the Environment Court process that the guys have been deep in the detail from since May. So we got an interim decision that had, I think, 33 to 35 directions to staff with some questions that the court needed answers with. None of this has been simple. Court issues a minute, we have a response. Court issues a minute, has a teleconference, another minute, response. So there's an awful lot of toing and froing. If we go to the next slide, Geordie. So where we're at in the process is we've just lodged a response with the court yesterday. We've got another one coming up next week. The court will consider those. The court will give us more direction, or the court will say, thanks, we've got enough to make a decision. The court is the only one who can make a decision on outstanding matters. In terms of the Resource Management Act, if you just scoot along, Geordie, I think there's one in there. Council's remaining statutory responsibility is to approve the plan under Schedule 1 of the RMA. Council cannot, there is no discretion for council to refuse to adopt the plan. Prior to the election, we sought legal advice from Simpson Gresson for council. We shared that. We also, one of the questions that came back from councillors was, could another law firm have a different opinion? We said, let's test that. So a couple of weeks ago, we provided these same questions to a different law firm, did not share the previous advice. The same advice came back, in fact, a little bit stronger, and more than happy to share that advice with councillors, and that will be legally privileged in accordance with the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. So we've got that. Our next responsibility is to implement the plan and fulfil our JMA responsibilities, because there are responsibilities under the Joint Management Agreement around making sure now that we've got a plan, we're implementing it, we're monitoring it and we're reviewing it. Next slides, Geordie. So that's kind of where we're at, Warren. I don't know if you want any questions. There's a bunch of other matters raised, such as some of the criticism of staff, some of the comments that we've heard come through that have been raised by councillors. I don't know if you just want to pepper pot through some of those or stop now to talk about where we're at.
So let's pause here, Tracy. Probably if we can keep the questions to the process and the slides we've seen and where we're at today, and if people are holding questions around some of the items that Tracy just mentioned, of more individual details and stuff, then we can probably get to those following this. But no lights are going off that have come on, so we'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks to you, Warren. Tracy, I'd just like to get my head around, I know the vision and strategy sets you on the pathway to this PC1 process, but who sets the standards? Who determines the standards that we have to achieve?
So those standards are determined, they were determined through the collaborative stakeholder process with the input from the technical leaders group. So the science was given, and then there were many conversations had with that collaborative group. There were probably about 47 community conversations and as many sector conversations that were had. We put that all into the policy machine, and then those standards are set and they are documented in the plan change. And they were the first short-term and long-term standards. Mike?
The water quality standards are all in it's a bit of a behemoth, table 311.1. And essentially that presents current water quality data and targets. And those targets, as Tracy said, were set by the collaborative stakeholder group with advice from the technical leaders group.
So the targets are that the water should be swimmable, should sustain fish life suitable for eating. Is that my understanding is correct?
No, you go, Mike.
So there were a range of options that the collaborative stakeholder group looked at in terms of how to set those targets. And in general, where they landed was and Liz will be well aware of this, an upper band approach. So in the national policy statement, back then it was the 2014 national policy statement for freshwater management. The water quality is defined as A quality, B quality, C quality, and D quality. And
can you answer my question, Mike? Because I'm asking, the standard is sufficient to support clean, healthy swimming in the river and catching fish suitable for human consumption. Are those, is that the standard?
yes, but we're focusing on those 4 contaminants: nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and E. coli. They are contributors, particularly to the fish example you use. Those are only some of the things that affect fish life, but those are things which are linked to poor water quality.
Trying to keep this as simple as I possibly can, all right? Because to me, we're trying to make, we're setting all sorts of different standards, and like, we don't live in a perfect world, as you and I both know. But if the river, the ambition of those, the guardians of the river and river authority and anybody else who's going to have their finger in the pie, set the standards as being suitable to support swimming, fishing, suitable for the table, I can assure you that that's already happening, and I will capture. In fact, I was out walking after I finished council yesterday. There were kids swimming in the river. They're there every day. That was bloody cold, I can tell you. But they're still swimming in it. And
Yes.
they'll be there this afternoon if you want to join me. We'll go down and check with them.
Yeah.
The
So-
water is perfectly clear and it's suitable to support swimming. And this is at the bottom end of Hamilton, at the bottom end of under the Puketi Bridge.
So there's a difference here, councillor, in that we have a national standard for swimming water quality, which says this is the level of E. coli that's acceptable, many people will swim in waterways that are not suitable for swimming. But in terms of the national direction, we've been asked to set targets relating to the national standard for swimming water quality.
So who do we need to talk to
So
in relation to those standards?
this,
Because that seems like we're talking to the wrong people.
yeah, so in relation to the standards, and as much as you would like to get a simple answer, I'd love to give you one. However, the national policy statement on freshwater says there must be standards. Cool. What are they? Well, you go and determine them for your region, going through a process, talking to a lot of people and landing on them. Now, the CSG went through, and we've got the vision and strategy that talks about being safe to swim and take food from for the river's entire length. Now, Liz will remember, because Liz was privy to some of the CSG conversations, that everybody grappled with that for the exact reasons that you are, Chris, saying, look, it's just not possible and we can't do it by Tuesday. So there was a realisation that we need short-term targets because we do need to make progress towards those targets, but it's an 80-year plus journey. So in order to measure, have we made a blind bit of difference or not, you need to set the baselines, and that's what Plan Change 1 does. It sets the baseline and how much movement in the baseline. Now that's all good if the same bit of water enters Taupo and leaves Port Waikato, but it doesn't. That water is, you know, you've got contaminants, the lag, how that all goes in. So it is, we would love it to be simple. It will never be simple. So the targets are set. The only way you can unset those targets is a plan change. The only way you can do a plan change is wait until 2027, because the government has said there will be no more plan changes until 2027. So if we don't like them, that's what we need to focus on. I wish it was simple for you, Chris. It's not. That's why.
One more point. Mike very kindly shared with me a video presentation put together by one of your previous staff members. I can encourage councillors to send that to other councillors. Very informative.
Because I think importantly that presentation shows that there is some good that has been done, and the river in parts has improved.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about economics, but I'll come to that later. So just a quick question. You've made it clear that councillors can't be involved in the process, that you're before the court and your court officers. I note here in the Raupatu meeting of the 28th of August, there was a circulation of the plan change PowerPoint to committee members, and then a note that Waikato Regional Council and Waikato Taunui align their submission points in response to the PC1 interim decision. Is that correct?
I don't know the PowerPoint that you're referring to. I'll have a
Or
look.
the alignment of
I know
submission
that
points?
there was an alignment of similar points to the NPS freshwater management national direction proposals that were coming through at the time. In terms of the interim decision, we had a set of instructions that we must respond to, which we did. We did not seek input from any other party other than ourselves in our response.
So that's an incorrect note.
However, there might have been alignment, some of the responses that we were asked, where River Iwi gave the same position, but there may have just been not coincidental, but alignment because we were sharing similar positions. But in our responses, we didn't consult in our technical responses with anyone else.
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
WIC needs to have an independent viewpoint on these things generally.
Well, our staff have their professional technical viewpoint. Yes.
Thank you.
If the court instructed us to talk with River Iwi or federated farmers or commercial vegetable growers, then we would have done that.
Gary.
Tracy, Tracy, through you to the panel, to the lot here. The river, I've spent my life in that area, in the Wangamarino and the whole area there. I've taken it from when it was in really good order to where it is now, and totally agree. I can show you photographs recently taken aerials of flying over it and seeing how degraded and how terrible it looks. And I can take you in the boat and show you firsthand on there as well. With PC1, with the report, been right through the 370 pages and summarised it and red flagged it and identified all of that sort of carry on, but nowhere is there a mention of the koi carp or the avian DNA, avian E. coli. What can you tell us about that and why is it missing? Because I see the identification in the report that I read over the weekend that the main culprit is beef farmers and for turbidity. It was identified there as, if I got it wrong, tell me. But to be on the river and you see that 500,000 tonnes of koi carp working up the bottom of the river, tearing it up, and their bottom feeders and that. And then you go into koi carp and you say, and you see the water coming into the Whangamarino as water tested as such, and then coming out and it's far worse with nitrates, what have you. Then you look at, you ask the question, okay, what contaminants do koi carp add to it? Well, I did a search on that and there's a lot of nitrates and phosphates created through the urine and and feces of koi carp even in there. But again, farmers are told, no, you're the ones that did it. And there's no mention of the koi or the E. coli. So just, could you give us a bit of a rundown on what you've come to there?
Yeah, look, I'm not an expert on that in any way, shape or form, but know that koi carp has been an issue that us as a council have grappled with for some time, particularly around responsibilities and just what our role is. And we've tried many things and we will carry on trying many things. But Mike, the science around koi carp, and I know you mentioned yesterday, Gary, also Canadian geese, and we've done a bit of work on Canadian geese. But Mike, this is an issue that Mike has been put in front of him many times. Yeah.
Well, I'd say I absolutely agree, Gary, that koi carp in much of the lower Waikato, including up into the Waipa and even into the Hauraki, are a major issue. And they create a lot of physical damage in terms of stirring the sediment. I mean, you know all this. When we look at the Whangamarino wetland and that wider Whangamarino catchment, there are three core issues that, from a technical point of view, we believe are the big levers to pull to try and improve things over time. One is around getting the flows and levels right. So, the whole system was designed back in the 50s and 60s primarily for flood protection. That's had impacts on the natural environment. The other is the amount of sediment coming in from the catchment, and there's been huge work done by our ICM guys and by landowners and Maitahuru catchment and others to try and reduce this loss of sediment from the land. And then the koi is the other thing. When we look at the amount of loading of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus to Lake Waikato, for example, the vast majority of that is coming from the catchment, so from land use in the catchment, including farming. It comes into the lake and then is continuously recirculated by wind action and koi carp action. So the koi themselves are not creating nitrogen and phosphorus. They are feeding on the bed of the lake. They are taking in material. They're processing it. As you say, they're pooping it out. They're recirculating the material that's already there. We do not create nitrogen and phosphorus. We take it in our food, we process it, and we poop it out. same as the koi carp. The only things that create that nitrogen and phosphorus is external sources such as fertilizer, nitrogen fixation through clover and things like that, and feed brought into the system. That's where the nitrogen and phosphorus comes from.
My understanding of the nitrogen in that Whangamarino area is maybe have a look. I question it here. I'm questioning, not stating. I'm questioning whether it is to look at the forestry. And
sure.
And
Yeah.
when you have forestry there, that pine needles is one of the biggest creators of nitrates, where the carbon nitrogen ratio of the pine needles, when they fall off the trees, they fall to the bottom right through the Maramarua forest, which flows straight into the Whangamarino. The C to N ratio is so high that sure, pines are great for sequestering carbon, but it has the nitrogen ratio is too high, so the nitrogen is shed, and there is a train of thought that again the blame has been put on dairy cows and urine, which has been in the E. coli going back being avian and not bovine DNA tested, but a lot of that nitrate may be coming from the pines in the Maramarua forest flowing straight in there. As far as wind action,
Gary, can I get, are you going to ask some questions, or is it more of some observations which may be able to be sent through to staff or something?
okay.
You know, we've got some technical officers. Tracy, did you?
No, I was just going to say, look, if there are specific technical matters, we can set up meetings with staff subsequent, so we can actually have those more detailed conversations about those.
Look, I value your insights and everything like
Yeah,
that, and that, don't get me wrong.
question
but
was
yeah,
the
you want to
taking into-
understand that they're
taking
aware of
into
these
account-
other factors.
Are they? Why is it that the koi and the geese and the weir is the other, which no doubt you'll give us a rundown on the Whangamarino weir. Those are the effects, and the movement of the water and the water levels there as well. Correct.
And I guess potentially why these other mitigating factors haven't come up through the court case, etc., which I believe is probably your opening point. Yep.
Just,
Yeah, Mike, sure.
if I can, just to that point, Chair, that the Environment Court has, in their interim decision, have very clearly identified that for a catchment like Whangamarino, the scope of PC1 is only a very small part of the picture. They've said we've got to consider all of these other factors, including, I think they specifically mentioned Canada geese, maybe I was wrong, and koi carp and the hydrology of the system. So I think the court is recognising that it's a much bigger picture than just the 4 contaminants.
Just knock your mic off. Yeah, supplementary to.
Just the last point being whether the koi issue has been sort of minimised to point because it's in the too hard basket. Nobody's been able to come up with a solution of how to deal with it. So, okay, we can't deal with that, so we'll focus on this that we can deal with.
Thanks, Gary. Noel.
Just being pedantic, sorry. Tracy, throughout the last year or two or whatever, you referred to our staff as expert witnesses and being officers of the court. Now, being pedantic and as an officer of the court, officers of the court in New Zealand are generally judges, registrars and lawyers and not expert witnesses. However, they do have an overriding duty to the court that supersedes their obligation to their
Thank you.
the ones who pay. And so expert witnesses fall into a unique category. I'm reading, from my notes as a JP. So can you clarify if my understanding and training as who is an officer of the court now includes our expert witnesses, or are they the special relationship and duty of care that I've just outlined?
No, I was being brief with my words. They are council officers who are reporting to the court. They are not officers of the court as officers of the court are referred to in legislation. That's why I said thank you. I was being very parsimonious with my words. Yep. However, the point that you made is that they are expert witnesses. So they are experts. They do need to we all needed to declare what our qualifications are and such that we could appear before the court and give expert evidence to support the court's process. Yes. And this is that while we're laughing about it, it is a real tension because it's impartial and objective as a professional person, which may actually not, or it may contradict a council policy. Yep.
Thanks, Tracy. Robbie?
Were we going to come back and talk about the WEAR stuff at any time, or is that just an overview?
We weren't intending to go deep into that detail here, Robbie, but we can come back certainly and do that at a different time.
It's just my point of view is the WEAR is controlling water levels. And that's, sorry, there's two WEARs really, sorry. The WEAR that controls the Waikato River coming in, and there's also the dock and fish and game WEAR that controls the water level going out. And all the nutrients that you're talking about become issue when they come water soluble.
Is that a question?
Yeah, it's definitely a question. So the issue is the water level, not making it higher is actually the best thing you could do is make the water level as low as possible. So the water, the nutrients are not so dissolvable in that water.
Thank you. Yeah, go Mike.
I'd just highlight that I think the Whangamarino WEAR, again, like all of the other issues that we find in the Whangamarino are, they're part of that complex picture. I think that in the next 2 years, we'll be seeing, we being the council, but seeing Department of Conservation coming to us with a review of that WEAR. I think 2027 is the review date, and they're already starting to look at that. So I think as part of that Whangamarino action plan, which both yourself and Councillor Smith sit on, that again will be a key part of that action plan is how do we proceed with essentially a redesign of the Whangamarino WEAR.
I think that'd be good news to everyone. Brett, did you?
I was in part. I guess what I'd say is what's quite encouraging about the conversation is the conversation right now is bigger than PC1 because all of the some of the issues that are being described here today are much bigger than PC1. PC1 is just part of this story. PC1 doesn't pick up the WEAR. It doesn't pick up the geese. It picks up the things that are about land use change, which is the piece of the pie that the CSG thought that Plan Change 1 could deal with. And I just wanted to just make sure that there's clarity about what officers of the court do, such as myself, when I'm asked to give evidence. It's that I know we're not using we're just using colloquial language around that I'm there to serve. I'm there to serve the court. So the start point for this is council's decision. That's the start point. The start point is the plan that which was council's decision. Parties wanted to change that decision. Yeah, so parties want to change and alter your decision. I know that you might not have been the ones that made the decision, but it's your decision and parties want to change your decision. And so through the court process, they ask us, and that's why they want us to make sure that we're officers of the court, that we're not defending something which this council has made. They're asking us to give our professional view on changes that others want to make to your decision. Because one thing that the court can do is to say they're dismissing all of the appeals and what becomes Plan Change 1 was your original decision. So when people talk about that, so staff are simply giving advice as it relates to other parties wanting to change your decision. So if somebody comes along and says, we want to change it so that all of the consents happen in year 1 rather than in year 5, they will say, Brent, what do you think about that? And I'll go, that's going to be really hard to implement. So I give them advice about that. If they ask for, we would like to change things from having a stock slope for stock exclusion to some other method of doing that, they will ask for advice about how would that go about being implemented. But remember, the starting point is council's decision. And so staff aren't making up new stuff. They are giving their professional view on changes that others are looking to make to your plan.
Thanks for that clarification, Brent. Ben?
Yeah, I wanted to move to economics.
Can
Can I just finish on that subject?
Can I? Yeah.
Please?
Yep.
Yeah, just
Yep.
on the weir issue at Whangamarina. DOC has been intransigent and said that's the level. In the Whangamarina discussions, they have now come to the realisation and are articulating the fact that they are looking with the weir reconsenting in a couple of years' time, that they want to work with the community on perhaps having variable levels to the weir to reflect natural conditions, summer, winter, autumn, spring, whatever, so that it's more natural rather than a blunt instrument. And so this council and the community need to be getting their thoughts around it so that when that comes in, we are in a position of being informed rather than just saying, yeah, that's right, or no, they're all wrong. I think we need to get better, and we've had an indication that DOC are willing to actually discuss and change. So we need to be front-footing this sort of stuff. I just want to make that.
Can I just add one comment to that, Noel? Because I want to endorse what you've just said, because what we don't want is that this battle happens via a consent process.
Yep.
We want the consent process to be putting in the paperwork which endorses what the community has asked for. Because when we have the battle through a consent process, it costs a fortune, and it doesn't really get to the end game. And sometimes what it means is that people are having to do some compromising up front about stuff. But as we saw what happened with the review of the Lake Waikere situation, that finally got to a point where parties would agree to something, but after an incredibly arduous, drawn-out, costly process, which if it happened at the front end would have saved everybody a lot of angst.
And if I could just make a comment, Plan Change 1 hasn't been the prime driver for the weir. Just to make sure things aren't getting tangled up, it's quite separate. And while it's in the Whangamarino catchment and is a critical part of it, the weir and Plan Change 1 are quite separate, but there is a weird little Venn diagram there in the middle. Yeah, it's just important.
Yeah. Thank you. Just stopping, Tracy. I'm pretty happy with the process we're going through and the questions are being asked. So if you're happy, I think we'll just
Yeah,
carry on in that vein.
There's about another 5 slides, which is really just trying to tease some more stuff out and validating some of the comments we've heard. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
I think we've got a couple more questions, and then we'll come back to your slides. Ben.
I just wanted to come to economics because I'm struggling to find anywhere where we can tell the public exactly what the economic cost of this will be. And I note that the one thing that we have is the flyers that you attach to the document, which says that council estimates a 4% loss in production, which equates to $37 million in annual profit. That's 2018. What I want to understand, having read the interim decision, is some of the impacts in there, because it seems to me that you've got the lost production, which is assuming it's 4%, whatever that's worth. Secondly, there's the cost of the setbacks on production. Then there's the cost of fencing. Then there's the cost of the farm plans, and then there's the cost of consenting, given that 75% of dairy farms, 2,500 dairy farms is going to be requiring consents, and many of those costs are coming up front. And I just draw your attention to the fact that the as you pointed out earlier, the Environment Court itself states it's not known how the major changes will be achieved, or the social and economic effects are not well understood. So the court itself is admitting this, but I note on, and I just want to understand this. So yeah, basically page 240, Bruce Cameron, sheep and beef farmer, actually was quoted for his local fencing contractor. The JWS report records that it would cost approximately 46 million for dairy and 24 million for dry stock to do fencing. But when you get over the page, the court is saying fencing, we've added a 20% for the difference between the 3 and 10 metres. On that basis, we consider estimates of 140 million for dairy, 170 million for dry stock, combined estimate of 310 million. When the 46 million and 224 million for dry stock is added, this comes to 380 million. So is the cost of fencing, according to the interim court judgment, potentially 380 million?
The answer, and I'll be a bush economist and call on Blair if he wants to give anything, is we don't know. We haven't got a final decision from a court. We've got some comments that have responded to an interim decision of the court. Until such time as we get a final decision from the court where fencing, stock exclusion, all the other mitigation measures are quantified, we don't know what the potential economic impact is. We will not be able to give anyone 100% certainty of this is what the economic impact will be for the catchment. Similarly, and I've just thrown this slide up here, if we haven't got any resourcing in our budgets to undertake the work, because, and I'll use language here, and please don't go looking for it in the court's decision, but the court's decision, the final decision, will have an implicit assumption on economic impact in it. There will not be an economic impact assessment associated. There will not be a volume associated, but the court will take that into consideration as they must. In terms of what the actual economic impact will be on day one, we don't know, because we don't know what we're going to get from the court. We can shadow box and guess around what we've seen in the interim decision, but the amount of effort going into that to make an estimate at this stage, I don't think is an efficient use of resource until we get the final decision, and then we can have a look at it. And one of the bullet points we've got there is, what questions do councillors want answers to? Because that will help us scope something up. We'll also either come back to council and ask for additional resource, or say, here's some pieces of work that we signed up to for the next 12 months. We're not doing this because we will do this. And then also have a conversation with council, and I have no preconceived idea, but is it best to put that resource into the economic impact assessment, or working with Brent and Tracy and their team to get out there and understand the implementation? Those are the conversations we'll bring back to council. So I can't give you an answer, Ben. What we have got is what the court is working through in their decision, and that's what's detailed in the joint witness statement. But we can't give you an answer.
Ben, can I try to add something here? I know it's not probably going to answer your question, but just the context. So when Plan Change 1 was notified in 2016, the expectation for fencing and fencing to be completed was in 2026. Now,
June.
yeah. So when it was proposed by this council, the expectation was all fencing would be completed by now. So I'm answering you if I was the judge. In 2020, the council's decision required independent commissions, but the council's decision required fencing and planting within a certain number of years, and on the whole, it was a small period of years. Now, a number of the appellants have said that's not doable, and so over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been quite a number of conversations between appellants and staff noting that this council's start point was here. And we've been working with parties who have said that's not doable, moving away from the council's position. So the council's position was supported by Section 32 that said that this position is justified from a Section 32 perspective, cost benefit analysis. Parties are looking to move away, and we've been working with parties departing from council's decision, which makes it more implemented. And so some of the things that I know are happening are around, should the timing for that be changed from 1 to 2 years to 5 to 10 years? Those are all parts of the conversation that there's a limited amount of detail that I'm allowed to give because I'm serving the court, but those are the sorts of things that you would expect your staff to be doing with the parties saying we can't do those things. And so the most recent thing that's come through from Graham Pennell in particular, I'm not going to get into what he said, but his first line was how grateful he was for the way in which staff have been, as they've been trying to work through what is implementable. Recognizing that there are a whole bunch of other people who thought that the council decision here, which was far more restrictive, was the appropriate decision, and things are moving in this direction. So just trying to help that between the decision of council and now, there's been quite a lot of change that we can only talk so much about, which is about making things far more implementable, spreading out things around when things need to be done, spreading out when you might need to have your farm plan done. All those things are about making things people, the farmers and growers who are going to have to.
My point is, I'm a lay person in this and I work with the community. I'd like to be able to say to them, based on the interim decision, the court is suggesting it will cost 380 million for fencing and a further 250 million for riparian planting. Now, those, I'm not sure that I'm accurate in reading that, but if that's the case, that's a hell of a lot different than telling them in a folder that we give out that it's 40 million. There's a huge disparity in the costs, and those costs are only for the fencing, the riparian planting. It's not the loss of production, which is what that 4% was. And I don't see why we can't summarize the data that we've got so far and have a one-pager saying this is what, if we, based on what the court has currently said, this is how much, and a 4% loss of production is now not 37
Can we
million.
take that away as an action for you, Ben, to look into that and see if we can come up with a one pager with a big disclaimer at the moment that says all
Interim.
subject to change.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's just so that
How about we take that away as an
talk to
action?
the politicians, because at the moment we tell them, oh, it's 40 million.
So we'll also put the benefits in that as well.
Absolutely, but we need to know the economic cost. I've argued this throughout the process. So
Warren, can I come in here? Yeah.
Yep, you done.
that's enough for now. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to come in because it's on the same vein. In from my perspective, from an economic impact, it's massively understated. You know, I can go back to the 80s and I can document the capitalisation of land values from 80s through to 2010 and why it happened and how it happened. And we're going to unwind a big part of that. So it's not just the cost of fencing. And so the things that Ben are talking about, in my opinion, are small fry. That if we drop our production, if we're forced to drop our production by a percentage, there are multiplier effects on that. And if you think the New Zealand economy is in struggle street at the moment because somebody's lost $100,000 or $200,000 on their house price and they can't spend, you wait until you knock off 4 or 5 or even more percent of the farm's productivity and start getting them unwind nitrogen, unwind stocking rates, and what it does to land values, what that does to banking, what that does downstream. And when you start looking at the multipliers on that, you know, the economic impact of that is going to be massive, and we are hugely, hugely underestimating it. So it's not just the fencing and the riparian planting, it's actually the impact on capital values of properties, and then how that impacts, how that becomes bankable, and how that hits our rural communities.
Thanks, Gary. Blair, did you want to make any comment there in terms of the case studies whether there is that correlation between the case studies work that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so what we're currently doing, it's a little bit similar to what was done 10 years ago or whatever for Plan Change 1. We've contracted AgFirst to produce a bunch of model farms that we can use to try and understand what the economic impact looks like across the region. That will show through the input-output modelling that gets mentioned there, that multiplier effect. So how it affects suppliers to land users and sort of the downstream impacts as well. What it does show is just the income, the flows part of it. It doesn't show that change in the capital value. That would be an additional piece of work, but you're right, to do a full sort of assessment, that's probably what we want to look at.
Yep. Sure.
So that's great. So AgFirst is fine. AgFirst own economic analysis of their farms, their farming base over 100 and something farms, shows that the return on capital on the average farm in their client base is 3%. And you're going to wipe that out. When you take 4% out, you do not take it out of the top line, you take it out of the bottom line. If 4% comes out of their profit, you clean it out, gone. And that changes the viability of those businesses overnight, changes their bankability, and it changes, got to think about the what do they call it? The circumstances of the flow on, the unintended consequences. And that's what I think we're not looking at beyond the direct cash flow side of the business.
To that input, Gary. Keith, guys, I've got a speaking order. If you can turn your mics off. Gary M, turn your mic off, please. Gary M, turn your mic off, please.
I was going to
off, please. Keith.
Yes, thanks, Warren. So thanks, guys, for fronting up. This is pretty valuable stuff. So my question is probably multifaceted. So I'm looking at you, Blair, but I'm also responding to Brent's comments about the fact the Regional Council has been a lot more. Sorry?
No, I'm just signaling Geordie to change the slides.
Okay, yeah. So in terms of, there's no doubt that the Regional Council staff have been a lot more more biddable in terms of the conversation. So that's been great. But Blair, if you mentioned in the process, or the discussion was the Section 32, and you talked 2. In terms of the modelling, it doesn't take much, and I'm not an economist, but I can do some numbers. It doesn't take much, and I'm just following on from what Gary's saying, to look at the cause and effect of what's PC1 could and will do. And it just doesn't take much. You can do that. You're an economist, you crunch numbers and you can tell. And I don't want to make it a criticism because we've had to come to a point, but our core responsibility is to the economic welfare as well as the environment, as well as the social in our region. And the Regional Council has not taken this PC1 process through a clear understanding, and Tracy has just mentioned she doesn't know that the potential outcome of what PC1 is. So I'm challenging you that we should have a very clear understanding at each step of the way, each change of what the consequences are. And Gary is right. It's not only the 3% or 4% reduction, it's the current way that PC1 is tracking at the moment, it's putting a cap on production. And Waikato doesn't have any other options for economic growth. It's agricultural dependent.
Can I just make some comments? Council's done everything it's required to by statute. I just want to be very clear there. And we followed the statutory process We have engaged a hell of a lot of good people and worked with a lot of good people to get the information. We don't know, we haven't got the answers because we haven't got the final product that the process says when you get the final product, that's what you will have. What we have had is some experts front up to the Environment Court and give the Environment Court their perspectives on the economics, albeit that was 3 years ago. This thing is a movable feast until it lands, until we've got certainty. And as Ben asked, you could have a point in time quantification. So a point in time quantification for the interim decision, and that is based on the information that the Environment Court has heard, and that's what they've said. So we can generate that. What we can't generate is this is the total costs and benefits, because I will keep saying and benefits, to the environment, to the economy, and to the communities. Now, we know there'll be hits, there'll also be gains. It's our job, and when councillors keep saying you, it's us. It's not anyone you, it's us. And it's been all the us's since the councillors first said, hey, we want a collaborative process back in 2012. So it's us trying to get to the best possible outcome for what we must do by statute. And I go back to the collaborative stakeholder group, and everybody around the table said everybody has to take a haircut. It's just the size of the haircut. And the main issue with Plan Change 1, you take away all the technical stuff, all the sector perspectives. It's how fast, how much. That's what it's come down to, and that's what it's come down to in the Environment Court decision. How fast, how much, who pays? So the three questions right at the start, and they're going to be the three questions that the decision of the court that will need to answer.
Thanks, Tracy. Ben? Can I get those mics turned off, please? I do have a speaking order. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, Tracy. I appreciate that it would be really good to have a simple 1 or 2 pager on where the interim decision leaves us now, because in reading it through, I'm not sure if I've accurately interpreted what they've said. So that would be good to know. And so if it is 380 million for fencing, then that's something we need to know now, if that's what the court, and the court can change its mind later, but right now, this is what it means.
Mindful, sorry, Ben, we can totally do that based on the interim decision in May, noting that spider diagram that an awful lot's happened since then. So I just caution, we won't take it as gospel, but we will say point in time in May.
Put draft all over it, and but I would also like to also see, assuming the 4% is still the current estimate of loss of production, that we estimate the current production that now will be lost. So that will have increased since 2018 to now. So it might be 80 million. So we add that in. And the other point I would like is the time frame, because if we look at what we've March 2020 farm environment plans, we are saying that the permitted activity all must submit a farm environment plan within 6 months.
Changed.
6 months of becoming operative. But, you know, how soon do you have to have the fencing done? How soon do you have to have the farm plan? How soon do you have to have a consent? A time frame would be useful, because that's starting to flow out from the court as well.
So this goes back to what Brent was saying. So much of this is changing and moving at the moment. So again, we could go back to a version at a time.
2025,
Let us just think that through, whether it's useful or whether it might actually set up an expectation that we can't meet. But understand what you're after.
So Tracy, can I just ask a question, and may you or maybe Blair might need to respond to it. If we were to do a retrospective economic analysis of an interim decision, given it's moved on, what's the cost and time frame that would be involved to be able to do that? I'm just concerned that in spending cost and time frame, in that time frame, we might find that we've got another decision, which you want to know what the impact of that is.
Sorry, I don't want that. And in fact, I don't want the Section 32 analysis that Blair's talking about and would take a lot of time and cost. I simply want, look at what the court has said, assume 4%, and we've got what the production figures are. So it's very basic.
So can I just re-ask, what would
Mm.
what would the timeframe and cost be to do exactly that?
Well, I mean, I could go to Dairy NZ and find out how much production is right now, and then I estimate 4%.
We'll let
but so-
Tracy answer and Blair answer the
So what I was going to suggest is we know what you're after. Let us have a think about that and what we could scope up, something that could be useful whilst putting caveats in terms of this is the information, because what I envisage is it's not something that would take more than 2 or 3 days to have some high level numbers, but understanding that they are high level numbers, not quite on the back of a fag packet, but have taken 2 or 3 days to do. Blair, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think having answers to the questions that you're asking would not be that big a job necessarily. But there'd be quite a lot of uncertainty wrapped around them. So there's questions, for example, about we don't know what the difference between the interim decision or whatever other date that we're going to pick is. So with the stock exclusion question, and I assume the joint witness statement that you've been talking about is the one that was at the end of 2022. So the big questions there were around basically the length of fencing that's required, which revolves around a whole lot of spatial information questions like what order streams, on what slopes, wetlands, how are they being dealt with and that sort of thing.
The court's dealt with that in the interim. They've got estimates already. So it just whether I've interpreted them accurately or not is the question.
Well, we can do it. If that's the case, it's a straightforward multiplication effectively.
Just have to read the 390.
What our assumptions are about price of fencing and stuff.
And don't forget that there's more than dairying in this environment.
Let's raise the other issue about commercial vegetable growing. Well, not sure, but particularly commercial vegetable growers, because they seem to be, it's not clear to me from the interim decision where council sits on that yet, and I don't know if you can comment on that.
No, I wouldn't be comfortable asking anyone to comment on that because it is a matter of significant detail that we are working through the court at the moment, except to say, going back to what Brent said, and we've got some examples up there for you so you can actually understand where staff are trying to move the plan into the best place for as many people as possible. And that's what we're trying to do. After our closing legal submissions at court, there were a bunch of things that we suggested to the court. Now the court takes those away and decides whether it wants them or not. Then post the interim decision, there are also some things that the court's directed us that we may not necessarily agree with, but we've responded to. Again, that's up to the court to take on some of that. And commercial vegetable production is a live conversation. It's also a conversation, and Noel just mentioned sheep and beef. If, and this is the complexity, if one thing is given a degree of leniency, somebody else in the catchment's got to pick it up. So if you say, Robbie can farm however he wants to do and do whatever he wants, everybody else in that catchment then has to make the contribution to make that target. Now, something Robbie's talked about at length with me is, so this is only for a third of the region. So what happens if people can't do what they want to do in the Waikato Waipa catchment? Will we see them jumping into Hauraki? Now, at the moment, there are no rules in Hauraki, and it has a baseline of X. So suddenly all the people who say, well, we want to go where there are no rules or no provisions, if they start shifting around, then the others in that catchment have to take account of those overs and unders. Somebody else has to mitigate the impacts. It's bloody tricky. And with commercial vegetable production, it's real tricky. Just as dairy is very tricky and sheep and beef. Kiwi fruit, you know, it is quite the Jenga game.
So
Wild
I
west
think,
of
I think I might push a little bit further where Tracy was comfortable to go, and I don't think I'm going to be saying anything which is inappropriate in terms of my role with.
Will Fisher go in jail?
And that is my understanding of the fundamental concern from the hort sector, because that's fundamentally what you wanted to know. The council's decision has different rule frameworks based on whether or not something is existing or expanding. Existing is defined by council's decision as the activity that was occurring between 2006 and 2016. So that's what's called existing, and that gets in the council's decision, that gets an activity status of controlled. And you'll all know what that means. That means that you're guaranteed you're going to get your consent back. If it's expansion, it has a different category, again, in council's decision, which is causing some challenges for some of our hort sector who are challenged by the definition of expansion. And so so the court, so the council decision is this, the court is saying this is a concern from parties. There are some challenges that the court has around scope. So I don't want to get too much into that, but for those that have been involved, as you would have been, Chair, that there are things that you might like to consider that you don't have scope to consider. And you'll know what I'm meaning when I say that, those of you that have been involved with those processes, and that's really challenging. That's very challenging. So I'll just leave it at that. Eh?
Okay, there it is. Tracy, when you talk about a haircut and take a hit, the Pukekohe vegetable growers, they have strongly said that they cannot comply with what's been put in front of them, and that if it is as they are led to believe that it will be, that they will be out of business, that they could not comply. And when you talk of the multiplier effect that Gary says there, that would have massive ramifications for the whole country.
And that was a matter that the court tested because they wanted evidence, because those statements were made at court and the court had heard contradictory information in other parts of the country. So they asked for hard evidence to support those statements. And we are aware that it will be hard for the commercial vegetable growers. We're aware of that, where they have participated in the process from the start, and we are having ongoing conversations with them. But as I said, if there is leniency in one area, somebody else has to pick it up. Where does that happen? How does that play out? But as we can't go into too much detail. We totally appreciate what the commercial vegetable production growers are saying, and they've also had no, I think you were at the meeting where they were very forthright in our freshwater policy conversations. And we've got the message. Yeah. Yep. I do want to say, Gary, we definitely have heard that. You know, we're not deaf, we understand. And as I said, we're trying to get the best outcome for as many people as possible in the catchment and for the river. And that's what this is about.
Gary, can I add, so that just because you'll be hearing, when they say they cannot comply, there's no prohibited activity rule. It's all about whether or not what consent pathway you need to go through. So are you going through a controlled activity consent pathway, restricted discretionary or discretionary pathway? So it's not like there's prohibited rules in there, it's what consenting pathway. And so one of the things that the hort sector have identified, as have others, and this council has done its very best to help with that, is the very nature of the legislation. The legislation puts in place restrictions for when a permitted activity rule can, which is section 70, and it also puts in place restrictions under section 107 for when consents can be granted. It's not plan change 1, it's the law. This council put a lot of effort in its last term to convince the Crown to amend Section 70 of the RMA to enable Plan Change 1 to put in place some 2,500 plus permitted activity rules, which otherwise it wouldn't have been able to do. That was a collective effort between governance and staff to put that pressure. And in a second, I'm going to come to you and then give you a special acknowledgement, Keith. Government and staff to push that message, but we weren't able to do it alone. So our colleagues at Federated Farmers, our colleagues at Beef and Lamb, our colleagues at Dairy NZ, our colleagues in the dairy sector all pushed the same message, and you would have seen that they changed at the very last minute, and that came from collective effort. We all collectively did the same thing around Section 107 of the RMA, which is impacts on consents. The Crown replied to you and to Chris and me and said, we recognise this is an issue. We can't fix it right now. We commit to fixing it as part of the new legislative process. We will be trying to collectively, between ourselves and our colleagues at Feds and others, keeping them to that commitment to fix Section 107. So when the hort sector talk about they can't comply with PC1, it's not they can't comply with PC1, it's the consenting process that would go through might be captured by a piece of legislation we need the Crown to sort out. Hopefully that was, because it's not PC1, but PC1 requires them to get authorisation for their activities. And one of the challenges that they have is which activity status they get captured by, which is...
Thank you, Brent. Yeah, Tracy?
Yeah, Warren, look, we've just got some comments up here on the slide, which is some of the comments that we've heard from different councillors around some issues. Really keen to provide responses to some of these, and I think we've talked through a couple, but if there are any other matters or observations or outstanding questions that people have, I'm really keen to understand what they are so we can arm you with some of the responses such as what Ben has sought. Yep. And then I think we've got a couple more slides as well.
Okay. Robert, you did have your light on. Did you have a question you're hearing or?
Yeah, no, from the community meeting last night, it was definitely the community's asking what sort of staffing levels we're going to increase by the implementation of PC1. They're seeing ads in the paper and they're going, that's hundreds of people. And I go, I don't think so. I think it's maybe 5 or 6 I've heard, but definitely the community's out there saying hundreds.
Well, and we posted this the other day, Robbie, and it's absolutely not. So what many of you in this room will know is that the significant heavy lifting for both the National Freshwater Farm Plan regulations and farm environment plans will be coming from the industry. Certified farm planners, a farm plan needs to be certified by an independent party, and so our job is to try to encourage people to take on that role, to train them in doing that role, because a farmer needs a certified farm planner and they're not council. So the people that need, the people that we as a region need for delivering Plan Change 1 and the national regulations are rural professionals to step up to become certified farm planners. And you probably would have heard Chris has been trying to get in place national certification around farm planning well before we had a PC1. So that there's really good quality people out there giving advice to farmers. The roles that you'll see advertised are that in Tracy's area, when we've had people that have moved on to other roles, we've not been filling them because we haven't wanted to spend money whilst things are on the delay. And so you'll see that what that means is that we're underspent in a number of areas because we've been not spending money whilst we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Our sense is now the government tells us we are going to get freshwater farm plan regulations, and the court tells us that we are going to get a PC1. And so the 3 or 4 or 5 people in Tracy's team that we've been holding the vacancies for, those are the things we're advertising for, Robbie. Certainly not hundreds of people.
Second question is the one that Tracy spoke about transfer of most probably wealth and nutrients over catchments. Just this week, I think it was this week, we had a Fonterra farm hit $106,000 a hectare. Not a Tatua farm, a Fonterra farm hit 100. So sorry, mate, you wipe our land shit. But it's a scary number out there, and you're affecting, we're affecting that economic base, it's big numbers. That farm is also in a floodplain. It's affected by our, what it can be built on it in the future from habitation plans and all sorts of things, but it still hit that number. So I got here, what's happening over this side with PC1 may make that even worse, or what plan change 2 could affect my area is quite significant. And I think that needs, when that decision's made in the years to come, we have to go through a way better process in PC1.
I was going to say before, it's been a bit of time that's gone by. Tracy and Brenton and the team, I think that you've articulated it exceptionally well for everyone today, but I would like it recorded if we can, please, in writing. I'm not sure that everyone has heard all the detail that was critical in helping us reply back to some of our community members. There's some key things in there that I've heard today that actually, some of it I didn't know myself, but there's people around this room I still think haven't heard it properly. A lot of what we've been talking about has actually been addressed through the appeals process, through Dairy NZ, through Fed Farmers, Beef and Lamb, and so that process is underway. So we can't, in some ways, I feel we're sort of relitigating some of that. The economics, important, yes, but it's been, and everyone has had the opportunity to appeal and submit, put their submissions in, put the appeal in. That's been and done. So now the Environment Court will give us what it is that we will need to work through. So the haircut, Tracy, I just love that. I love that because you know what? When we were sitting in that CSG group, we all knew that we would have to all give and take, that there was, every sector was going to be affected somehow. And I remember the people, George Moss, James Houghton, those are the two really, that James from Beef and Lamb, it was a really intense few weeks when we were coming to the crunch time. So if any of you kind of want to understand how we got to that plan, go and talk to them because they will give you the detail. They will remember it, I can guarantee you that, because it was intense at the time. So I just feel we are relitigating a lot of the stuff here, and essentially what you've talked about and what we're going to land with now is something that it's our plan. We have to take, we're going to have to deliver on it. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I appreciate that, Liz, and that insight. It is critical that all councillors hear what staff are saying to their responses. Chris.
Gary hit on most of what I was going to say, Warren, but to me, what we're not measuring, and I'm hoping that Blair's going to be able to, is actually the impact on the GDP for the Waikato. To me, that is the critical thing. It's not the short-term capital expenditure. That's massive. It's got to be funded, but it's the impact on the Waikato economy that really concerns me the most. And I go back to the original question I asked, why are we doing it? Because from what I can see, fish are being caught, they're being eaten every day. People are swimming in the river. What are we trying to achieve? To kill the economy? It's nonsense.
Sure, there was a question in there, but thank you. Keith, and I am looking for questions. I'm not looking for statements, please. Staff are looking for questions. If there's something that you're hearing out in the public you want an answer to, that's this part of it. Yep.
Yeah. So, but I need a statement beforehand. So, so Tracy, I absolutely hear that the team has worked within the statute, but the court process had 35 directives that came back to the staff, and there was 4 bites to it. And in there, they were looking for guidance from not only the regional council, but the joint farming parties and that sort of thing. And one of the areas that the court was very concerned about was the financial viability of the farmers with the potential aspects of the PC1 rollout. And what I challenge you on is they were asking for technical advice and financial economic advice because the court doesn't have that, and we didn't provide it. I'm asking, my question is, why haven't we done it? And we still have a little window to do it, but why don't we help the court say, quite, in my view, we'll bankrupt the region if we go too far on this. Let's go for something that will work and is acceptable.
So, look, we've responded to all the directions from the court to the satisfaction of the court. Yes, they did level some criticism at WRC in a couple of specific paragraphs. I've got those in there, and also I think paragraph 397 of the interim report, where they've said we wanted more information. So we've gone back. We haven't heard anything back from the court. I could, in all good faith, not put up any evidence that said this will bankrupt the region. I was told, and a councillor got an inch away from my nose when we notified it, and I was told I was personally responsible for the bankrupting of the region. I'm not. I don't have that kind of unfettered cosmic power at all. So, those kind of statements we would not put in front of the court. The other thing is everything would take resourcing, and the guys were working on a really short time frame to get things addressed with the court. Our lawyers talked to the court. The court have not come back and asked for any further economic information from us. We are in the dying throes of getting to the very end of hopefully the court process. So from my perspective, we've done more than what the court's asked for. We haven't kept everybody happy in everything we've done, but we've given it a bloody good crack. If the court came back and directed us to do in-depth economic analysis such that they wanted a lot more information than what a lot of the experts, not just us, but others provided to them, then we'd assess that and respond to it. But I'm really comfortable with what we've provided to the court and have taken on the chin some of the criticism, but they've also complimented us in other areas as well.
Thank you, Tracy. I'll leave that there. Thanks, Keith.
No,
Gary.
I just want to apologise for using the
I'll
word
leave it
bankrupt
there, thank
because
you.
it should not have been used, but just the financial viability, going back to Chris's point,
Impact.
the GDP, what the effects will be.
Tracy, I'd just like to, I've got a report here, a summary of the whole report that's come back from the Environment Court, but then there's a list of red flags here. There's 15, so I'll only read just the headings, and I'll give it to you as well.
Yes, sorry, what is the report, Gary? Where's this from?
From the interim report back from the Environment Court.
This is the report you've run through AI. Is this what you're alluding to?
Yes.
And an AI's interpretation of
Correct.
that. I think that needs to
Okay.
it needs to be taken offline.
Well,
Potentially.
I'm really happy to have the conversation. I just wondered what report.
Okay,
we're
well,
referring
we'll take that offline,
Yeah.
but I'll give it.
No, we'll have a yarn.
Yes, we can. But like you say, we'll take it offline, so that's.
Cool.
Noel.
Thank you. Can I just for a moment go to the legal opinion, which is privileged? So I don't want to talk about the content of it.
Sorry,
But,
the legal opinion around conflict of interest?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I clarified with Marley and with Chris, it is public document, so you can talk about it if you
Okay.
like.
So 40 odd years ago, I fenced our river and streams, so way ahead of PC1. But I did make a submission And if I look at paragraph 18, I'm completely excluded from PC1 discussions until such time as the matter is resolved, because I included my comments on overseer and stock exclusion. So I don't know whether I should stop talking now because I'm excluded. But the reality is, when I read the document, there's a hell of a lot of us here who are conflicted if we accept the legal opinion, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. So before we get too much further in council business, I would like to council to ascertain who's in and who's out. Because while I don't have a problem with being excluded, I want equity in going forward. So when are we going to do that? And I don't want to just do it right now. I just want to raise the issue of when are we going to decide who's in and who's out, and particularly where the suggestion is to go to the is it the Auditor General or somebody, the
OAG.
yeah, get guidance on that matter that's raised as well. So whether it's you or Chris, because I originally sent these questions to you.
So, Noel, what I was going to suggest when this matter came up is that we seek advice from Marley as our custodian of all things democracy and relating to you folks.
She's not a lawyer.
No, she's not, but seek advice to Marley as to the options going forward, what the process is, whether it is a declaration from the Office of the Auditor General, just what we go through. So what I said to Marley, because Marley couldn't make it to this session, was to grab the exact things that you're saying now and then bundle them up, go to Marley and say, okay, where to next?
Okay,
How do we do that?
I want that from the Auditor General, because Robbie and I are both farmers.
Yeah.
He's not in the PC1 area, but he could. He's got interests similar to us.
Yeah.
But I am, and if I'm out of the Waiora committee and so I'd really like to know that early rather than starting the process and buggering it up and having to come back and restart.
Yes, and we as an organisation can seek those declarations from the Office of the Auditor General. And that was a question that was posed at the very start of the last triennium when we thought we might get a decision.
Yeah, and I remember filling in the forms, and Sarah at the time, and questions went and they came back and asked for more information. So what happened to that? Because I'm still waiting.
It is still all on file at the time prior to Sarah. So Sarah, for our new councillors, was our democracy team leader before Democracy Day. We ascertained where we were in the process and we were nowhere near a decision from the Environment Court. So rather than pursue that process at the time, we put it on pause, but it probably all that information I know Dave has at his hot little fingertips.
I probably need to update it. Thank you.
Ben, have you got a question that you've heard that you want clarification
No.
on?
So,
Because Councillor, I do want to move on to this implementation piece because that's the next.
Well, this is part of it.
the
So,
next piece. Yeah.
question for Brent and then a question for Tracy. So in terms of the farm plan advisors, obviously they're going to have to deal with not only 5,000 farmers in the PC1 area, but 8,000 across the region. How many of them are there so far? And, how soon do these farm plans have to start being delivered?
Segue straight into it nicely. So that's where we have been giving advice to the court about timing.
Right.
So the decisions version of the plan would have required, take a step back, for the vast majority of landowners in the region, Plan Change 1 will require them to get a farm environment plan as being part of a permitted activity, or a farm environment plan as part of getting a controlled activity resource consent. And there's some extras which are in the more high-risk catchments like Whangamarino and the lakes. But the vast majority are either a farm plan under a permissive regime or a farm plan as part of a resource consent. But what that does mean is that there's a lot of farm plans that are needed. Now, fortunately, there are some of our industry partners who are significantly along that pathway, because our dairy companies in particular, they've got farm plans for a lot of their providers which are close to being a farm plan that would meet Plan Change 1 or the national regs, but not quite. And so that's one of the pieces of work that our team have been doing. What's the gap between what they've currently got and what they might need? And so that will be the amount of work and effort that they have to do to get an appropriate farm plan, but there still needs to be all these people who are going to do the certifying. And that's always been the challenge. Will there be enough certifiers? So that's why we've been promoting to the government a long drawn out rollout for the national regulations, and also within Plan Change 1, having that rollout over a 5-6 year period, Hamish, 5 to 6 year period, so that you can chunk it out, so that you can do that, because we are reliant upon people putting their hands up to want to do the role. We provide the training, we do the certification of them, but we need people to front up for that role. So currently we've had, Tracy, how many people go through the training?
So when Freshwater Farm Plan system was up and running, we had 60 people who had committed $2,500 to become certifiers, and that was just in our region, and they were at different stages of our training.
So can I just be clear about the $2,500? That's central government to be certified for the national farm land regulations. That was a fee that went that direction. I think for people to do our training is $20.
And councillors, you had module 1 of that training in your workshop.
So you might say, why have you done that, Brent? And it's like, well, we need these people.
Yeah.
And so we don't want finances to be at the end of the day, for the system to be successful, you need really high quality people developing high quality farm plans, so our farmers have a really good plan to then implement. And that's a critical part of it. So we want to try to get barriers out of the way. But we equally, we need people to say, this is a business that I want to be in. And that's always been the risk of this process from the national system and the regional system. And that's why Chris has been working on it for over a decade, trying to get industry to have, let's think of it like a master plumber. You know, we need loads of master certifiers to serve the community. And that's why we've spread it out 6 years. So we're hopeful that these people will front up, but we still rely on them fronting up.
Yeah, just noting that from what we've been told, the minute the court issues its thing, it becomes operative. So that the time the clock starts ticking to whatever your time frame is.
So the first cabs off the rank with that would be within 12 months of the decision becoming operative. So if the decision became operative in April, May next year, the first farm plans need to be submitted. Have I got this language right? Submitted for certification, or is that the national language? You go, Hamish.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite go that far just yet, but I think some useful context here is to remember that PC1 started on its journey notified in April 2020, and in that process since, we had a lot of change in the national landscape. And so a challenge we've had through this process is how best can we align with the national process, so from a farmer's perspective, they're engaging with the same people.
Yep.
It's been a really big challenge. And we're still not technically there yet, of course, until we get a decision, but that's been a challenge. And now we've got a change in national landscape again. So it is a challenge, but just wanted to highlight that that's kind of off the back of maybe some of the, Brent said, what we're hearing from parties out there, those that are interested in becoming these certifiers, is a lack of certainty. Yes. Once we get the certainty, national, local, they're in. But the challenge that we have is we've had that certainty come and go.
Yeah. So just a follow-up question. In terms of dairy farmers, there's 2,500 dairy farmers in PC1. If 75% need consent, are you going to need more consenting staff to process them?
So the short answer is that's not the current plan. And the reason for that is that you don't really want to resource yourself for humps. It's a challenge to resource yourself for humps because when you have people, and we learned this when we were implementing Variation 6, we needed 2,500, 2,600 consents. And of course, when you have people on short-term contracts for humps, then when they're getting towards the end of their contract, they want to look for other jobs. So people want certainty, they want permanency. And that created quite a bit of a challenge because you have these people trained up to do this stuff, and then you can't keep them because they don't want to stay till the very end. So we're looking at a model which would have that risk more dealt with by we would administer and then have external parties do the processing for us. But we're equally, because the vast majority of them are controlled activities, and for those of you that aren't planners, a controlled activity is you're guaranteed you're going to get your consent, and the matters over which you talk about, which in planning language is the matters over which you've reserved control, is a restricted number of matters. And so the consent process can be far more concise. Now, people keep asking me exactly how much is it going to be. And I say, I can't tell you how much it's going to be. I can tell you what happened with variation 6. It was simpler, to be fair, it was simpler, but the average cost for a controlled activity consent through variation 6 was in that, you probably got one, Keith, in that $1,000 to $1,500 sort of range, something like that. That was a decade ago, but they're in that sort, they're in the small numbers of thousands of dollars order than the, the $40,000, $50,000 that you're talking about in the South Island. But remember, that's just our costs of processing. The true costs of a consent process are the costs of the applicant putting all the things together that they have to put together because the law requires them to do things. And so one of the things, again, that Tracy's team are doing is how do we make that process as simple as possible? So as an example, that not to steal Tracy's thunder when she's talking to EPC, we're looking at doing trial consents, finding somebody in the Whangarino that would like to go through a trial. And we, the collective we might fund that because then it takes away a little bit of the fear of what it might look like because somebody's gone through it and they've seen what it looks like. So the team are constantly trying to find ways to make this as streamlined as possible. But without doubt, there will be some challenges. There are some operations that are in catchments that are under significant risk, and those will be more challenging conversations. But if there weren't challenges out there in the environment, then this council wouldn't have plan change one in the first place. I take your point, Chris, that you don't think that they are there, but when they put them in place, there were clearly some challenges, and so there's going to be at some stage some difficult conversations.
Thanks, Brent. That actually sounds like enabling culture, which is something I don't think we're accused of very often. So, Liz.
Yeah, actually, it was a beautiful segue, Brent, because I was just going to remind those around the table that I've seen firsthand now the sound thinking now that's been going on and how this implementation is actually going to occur. And Tracy will know back in August, I attended one of the public meetings where it was, anyone was welcome in the Key Hall. It was a bit bloody cold actually, middle of winter at that time, where farmers were asked to come through, and I was there to ask what works for you for implementation. What would you like to see? So I've seen that enabling, process already in play, and some of the feedback that came through around how this might work was actually bloody good, I've got to say. I was really impressed. So yeah, I can see that there's been a lot of thought go into this already.
Thanks, Liz. I'll come over to Tracy over in the corner there.
Oh, great. I just wanted to add to what Brent said, is that we're working with our partners around how we can help the sector. So when we're talking about, those consenting examples, Dairy NZ are keen to work with us on it and help find a farmer. We're working with the red meat companies that want to help as well. So what we're trying to do is say it's not just us. There are a lot of other organisations that want to work in this space and help farmers together. And we're trying really hard at the moment during this time when it's still in front of the Environment Court around how we can do that. And like Liz said, we've been running lots and lots of events to ensure that the end user is involved in our implementation, and it's not just us sitting here in WRC deciding what's best. But you'll hear more about that at EPC.
Thanks, Tracy. Gary.
Yeah, and mine's in the same vein as we just answered, but will the regional council accept farm plans from like Silverfin Farms, Farm Shore, Fonterra, OCD, they're all doing farm plans for their farmers. So will they be an acceptable form of farm plan?
So there's two things happening in parallel, Gary. So for the national freshwater farm planning regulations, which the Crown is about to pop out again, they're looking at what they call IAPs, I think, industry assured programs. And so they will be working with the Fonterras of this world to say, if your farm plans look like this, then you can effectively tick off that being a farm plan. And so for those that are Fonterra farmers, some of them are on their first generation Te Aki plan and some are on their fifth generation Te Aki plan, and some of them, and so there's the distance between their farm plan and what the freshwater farm plan regulations require is a little bit different. So one of the things that Tracy's team has done to try to support that is looking at the various different products that different dairy companies in particular have been putting out, and the stuff that's coming through from dry stock and others, and doing a bit of a gap analysis to say this is the gap that would need to be before your what would have to be added to your plan to make it meet the requirements that are set out in Plan Change 1. So there's a bunch of work happening in that space. And we want to come back to the council in due course to talk to you about how could we support doing that. I've at the risk of getting in trouble with my CE, I just told you a little while ago that we have been holding back on recruiting some people, which has resulted in some savings of money which has come from the farming sector. Would the council like to use some of that money to be able to support farmers as we get into the heavy implementation? It's that front end type stuff, to guide and help people to get to the place rather than sort of pushing or dragging, So there's lots of thinking that's happening about that right now. The Plan Change 1, and Hamish will have to tell me if I'm right or wrong, the original version had certified industry schemes. Is that still in there, Hamish?
It is, but it doesn't necessarily do the same thing. So yeah, one of those little bits of detail. I think the challenge we have is that the national regulations, even the ones that still exist and how they might form in the next few months, they're not going to be identical to PC1. But stepping back, a good farm plan is a good farm plan. And that's the sort of the message I want people to get. It may not be that this farm plan contains this bit of detail in PC1, but a good farm plan is a good farm plan. So how do we support the sector? Prepare good farm plans. Good farm plan means the consent process is smoother. All of that is a lot more easy because the farm plan is the vehicle for change. The focus shouldn't be on the permitted activity rule or the resource consent that enables the farming activity. The farm plan is the vehicle for change, and so getting good farm plans out there is a real focus.
No.
Thank you. Implementation is very important, and it was incredibly to the forefront in the recent elections in the Waikato constituency. So one of the things that the community was telling those who were seeking their vote was that they wanted more councillor involvement in the implementation. And some discussions, I won't take up individual positions that were articulated, but the transparency of the governance coming through the implementation operational. So I really want to hear from the CE and all those who have got the delegated responsibility to do this, is how do you see that reassurance that the community is seeking, that the governors are comfortable with what the actual implementation is? And so there were things that were discussed as saying, when it's delivered from the court, the reality is people will interpret it differently, and we'll end up with case law because someone will get angry and they will get prosecuted. Or I'm not saying that's not our first approach, obviously, I hope, but at some stage things will appear in the court. So, or someone might want a declaration of what it means. So how do we make sure we've got all the parties in the same tent who continue talking after the decision so that the implementation is within the parameters of acceptable, all on the same page, all at the same time? Hopefully desirable. But what I would like to understand, and certainly the community were demanding of us, was how are you as councillors going to make sure that this is implemented fairly and appropriately. So what's planned by staff to make sure that we have that transparency, please?
Just, I'll get Brent to talk about process, but obviously the governance will be overseen through committee structures, and you'll be talking a little bit about that tomorrow. I note you said about the community in the north of in the Lower Waikato area, in your area, and of course PC1 applies to way more than that. And I don't know what other feedback other councillors got from other parts of the catchment, which we also will need to take into account. But Brent, you might want to talk about the plan going forward about governance oversight of implementation.
Absolutely, and one of the things that's really important for the community to understand, and it's a big thing, but it's in the detail, is that this council is the overseer of it. We aren't the instrument of most of it. Yeah. So getting the certification is an independent party. We will certify that that party is the master farmer. You know? But then the farmer goes to that party to get a certified plan. So from the governance perspective, you will be wanting to make sure that when we are certifying people, they meet the right standards to be certified, because the farmer is relying upon them to be really good at their job. So we aren't the ones that are certifying the plans. Us independent external certifiers doing that. Then when it comes time to audit, an independent auditor is auditing compliance with the actions in the farm plan. That's not this council, it's an independent party who's going to be doing that work. You will want to make sure for both ends, for all parts of the community, that we have appropriately trained auditors and that we are doing QA to make sure that they're doing their job. All of that is stuff, which is why I said to Robbie, I don't need 100 staff. I need people out there, because that's how the national system and PC1 are set up, because there's an independence to that. Where we will have to process the consents, but that's just business as usual. And you'll ask us, have we processed the consents? And like I said, most of them are controlled activities over the years, and they meet their standards and the consents go out. Where there's non-compliance, which is identified, we will need to follow up that non-compliance exactly in accordance with this council's enforcement policy. And we do it in a measured and a structured and a proportionate way. So
Sorry, Brett, I think, if I may, you've jumped further ahead. It's when David decisions, here, council, this is our decision, right? From that point until the council makes it operative, because the rules come into play immediately. The rules, when we make it operational, when in between there do we go to our industry partners, our key stakeholders, and even individuals? But when do we make sure we've got agreement? We've got the appellants who are there at the coalface. The wider community needs to know, and it's, if you're going to put the onus on external people to develop the farm plans, blah, 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 the general community needs to understand and have a level of understanding.
So Tracy and her team have been communicating with the rural sector, who are going to be the receivers of this obligation, for the last 3 years. Tracy and her team send out monthly updates to all that are looking to receive them about where things are at. With
the greatest respect, I've never seen one. I'm a farmer.
So I guess, so the team are doing what they can to reach out to people to say this thing that's been on the go for the last decade or more. Because at the end of the day, with all of the parts of the rural sector, be it, so I'll give you an example. When V6 came through, Feds were doing all sorts of communication with their members. Dairy NZ were doing all sorts of communication with their members. We were doing all sorts of communication with members so that they were aware of this new stuff that's coming their way. One of the things that's been a challenge with Plan Change 1, and one of the things that we constantly hear, is folks saying, yeah, we've heard this before. We've heard this before. It's been 10 years now. It's been 12 years now. Come back and talk to us when it's here. Tracy and her team spend a lot of time trying to get comms out to keep people aware. We thought it was going to be coming out a year ago. Now it's maybe coming out next year, but we will be continually communicating about when the decision is made, because when the decision is made, people have the first tranche of people. Remember that it's tranched out over 6 years. The first tranche of people, which is 500 odd people in the Whangamarino catchment, 400 odd farmers in the Whangamarino catchment are the first tranche. They'll have to do something by the middle of 2027. Then the next tranche of people, another 500 people, they'll have to do something by the middle of 2028, I guess 2 years. Yep. And so we are continually communicating with people about when something is needed. There's going to be some farmers in the Waikato Waipa catchment that will have no obligation other than meeting minimum standards for 5 years.
Tracy, have you got some slides on this? Or some comments?
I might have a slide, but I was just going to talk about next steps. So when we get the final court decision, it will be probably the size of the interim decision, if not more. As part of that, they will say, here are all our decisions. Now, that could still be appealed to the High Court on matters of law. We have one appeal in at the moment to the High Court on the interim decision. We are hopeful that the ongoing conversations off the back of the interim decision directions will assist in resolving that, but it may not. If there are no appeals on matters of law and you can't introduce new things, you can't relitigate, it is final. Council has the obligation to make the plan operative, but the rules, once they are beyond challenge, become operative. So there is a grey period. Also, we will not say to any of the landowners, not just farmers, but any of the operators in the catchment, there's a court's decision. We have to convert the court's decision into a revised plan, which will not be a 5-minute job. Right. So we will have all of that to do. We will also, before we gift this precious taonga to the implementation team, to Tracy, to Brent, to a bunch of other people, there is a lot of communication we will need to do coming out of Bruce's team in terms of policy, where we're at. There's obligations, treaty obligations under the JMAs we must have. Also, courtesy to everybody who's been involved, not everybody, crikey, but the majority of people been involved in the process to date, to thank them. So there will be a kind of a pre-implementation before the implementation period.
So can you just define what that might mean, please? Because
a couple of months. Right, by the time we get the decision from the court, I would suggest it'll be a couple of months. I'm thinking March, April, sorry. When we get a decision from the court, it's likely 2 to 3 months before we bring the recommendation to council, which is an administrative recommendation to make the plan operative. Warren and Chris get to sign it.
That's what I was really looking for, the details. So here it is on day one, but 3 to 6 months later, let's make it operational because we now understand and we've talked about blah, 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 blah.
But we don't have a chance to say, okay, we'll make it operational by virtue of Section 86F.
Yeah, it's a play on words, but there is, we have to make it up. We've got to pass a resolution.
Right? We pass a resolution to make the document the Environment Court said part of the plan. Yep. However, that's one part of the RMA. Another piece of the RMA, Section 86F, says the rules are operational once they're beyond challenge.
Yeah, so that's not a month, isn't it?
No, it's once the Environment Court's made the decision because they're beyond challenge, and a month if there are no appeals to the High Court.
Yeah, that's right.
So those steps we can map out for you. So you've got that and you understand.
It's helpful because with communication with constituents, we need to actually give them the timeline so that they understand, because some think the world's falling on the day the court announces. Some think it's going to be never because the council's miraculously going to stop it, and we know we can't. So we need to show.
Yeah, look, we had the exact same challenges when we notified the plan change because people thought everything changed from day one, which it didn't. So we can get some comms out around that. That's really important. Warren, I do just want to jump onto this slide because we've had a great conversation around where we've been, where we're at, its implications. It's no accident that the farm plan provisions mirror a lot of Plan Change 1 because the government let us do their heavy lifting for them through the Plan Change 1 process. Then they grabbed it and twisted it a little bit, so it doesn't quite mirror. What we've got is reform coming up. So we don't know if it's going to impact Plan Change 1, how, but we know it will, I should say. It will impact, we don't know how. So the goalposts are getting lifted again. We've got some new bills. What intel we do know is that the new bills will set up the framework, the national direction will have more detail. So we don't know the sequencing of those. We don't know what's coming out. There is an undertaking that Cabinet has given, that is in the minutes, around upholding treaty settlement provisions. So what does that look like? We do know, and thank God, there will be a simplification of national direction and durability of legislation. So if we get a different looking government next year, they're not going to turf it all out, which is great. Fingers crossed. Some of the activities we will be told you must do might or might not align with Plan Change 1. So we might develop an implementation plan, but suddenly we'll have some new times and dates set in different legislation. So I just want to say, isn't it great? We'll have a decision, oh crap, we'll have a decision that we might have to understand how it fits or doesn't fit with new national direction. So it is another shade of grey added to our process. But the key point is the bottom point. And this has been the point all along, and that we will have to work this so that not only Tracy's team, but some of our guys who are out there working in the catchments can actually say, hey, this is what you need to know now. And it's going to be challenging.
Thanks, Tracy. Liz. Yep.
Thanks, Tracy. Look, with all those shades of grey, and there are lots of them, this is a really complex thing to try and communicate. And I'm just picking up a lot of what Ben was talking about before, Noel, as well, that personally, I feel we need a really good communication strategy, right? That is not just a sort of an add-on to something, but this is huge. And getting that information out to all landowners, to farmers, that's not an easy thing. And I've seen some really big topics go badly out there in the past around communicating with your communities. So can we please have a lot of governance oversight over that as well? I know that's not what you want to hear, but I feel quite strongly that this is too important to not have a really robust strategy around communicating with our communities on it.
Thanks, Liz. Gary.
Just from an operational point of view, and I'm not sure whether the chief executive or one of the other team can answer it, or whether it can be answered at all. I look at the risk, of what you're putting up there, around changes coming up, and then how much time and money do we spend, executive time and management time, doing this, knowing that something's in the wing, in the wind coming up, and so I suppose, do you think about that? Do we think about what resource and time and money we're putting into something that could be different? Not thrown out, I'm not saying, but different.
Very much so. Very much so. Figuring how to ignore that. And so one of the things that we have been looking at is, irrespective of the national regulations, irrespective of Plan Change 1, what is productive work that's going to move us forward in terms of the outcomes for the council and for the community. And the one thing that we come back to is having a really good quality farm plan. Because if you have a good quality farm plan, that's going to support your PC1 obligations, it's going to support your national regulations. And so what the team have been doing is doing a lot of work around how do you support somebody having a good quality farm plan. And so we're doing work around training for certifiers. We're working around what would a good farm plan look like. The range of sort of workshops that Tracy's been doing, that Liz was involved with. Again, they're all things that are not throwing away money. They're all good things to do. And things that we haven't been doing is spending money where we didn't need to spend money, which is why you'll see in due course why we're carrying a bit of a reserve, because we have been spending money while we've been waiting. So as Hamish said before, the big thing for farmers is having a really good quality farm plan. And that's where we like to focus the energy, because that will mean they're in good stead. And it's the same in the Hauraki catchment, Robbie, because whilst the conversations here are all around the Waikato catchment, national regulations are about to pop out and those are national. So we'll be having people in the Hauraki catchment that are going to need to have a good quality farm plan at the same time that people in the Waikato catchment need a good quality farm plan. So that's our messaging.
If I could just help respond
Yep.
to your question. I think the example Brent gave of where we've chosen not to fill roles because it's a moving landscape too fast, is yes, we're actively considering that sort of thing. You know, in terms of, you know, when do we develop a communication strategy to go out to farmers because we've got enough certainty to be able to do so? Yeah, we actively hold, you know, to Liz's question before and to Noel's question before, we actively hold to do it. So it's conscious and it's active, but it's a balancing act. Because if we leave it too late, then we get accused of not giving people enough time.
So, and I appreciate that. So I'd like to support what Liz is saying, because I think she's spot on. But also what everybody needs to know is that we're not just throwing money in, you know, good money in after bad. And we, you know, you have thought about it and you are thinking about it and you're, you know, and I think that restraint, and it'll give farmers in particular a lot of comfort that we're saying we're not just charging here long in here, we're actually doing something. So I think what Liz is saying about a communication strategy and adding that sort of stuff, saying, you know, we are being prudent, we've been mindful, is key as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that we are holding money that we've collected from ratepayers, targeted ratepayers, so that we can use it in a really productive way to potentially help them in the process around the corner, is probably an example of that. I think, Tracy, we're going to add to that.
I was just going to say, just to you, Liz, EPC gets an update from Tracy every 3 months and has done for the last 3 years. And so it's pleasing to see that there are more councillors that are going to be on EPC going forward, because an update of how PC1 implementation, including the comms, how we're getting on with preparing people, is regularly reported to governance. And so there'll be more of you around the table that are getting that regular update with the new committee structure.
Yeah, just want to highlight for councillors that Plan Change 1 is one of 8 policy programs we've got on the go at the moment. Councillor Hughes has challenged us through the last long-term plan and has constantly challenged us through council and risk assurance to answer the exact question that you asked there, Gary. Why the bloody hell are we doing this when we know change is coming? We put a comprehensive report up in June 2024 on our freshwater plan review, because we were on a trajectory to meet a line that government said there's case law that says you better comply with statute, otherwise people will judicially review you. So it's our job to say to council, here are all the risks if you decide not to. And what we did is we actually stepped back from, I would say, a trajectory like that to doing a more medium level trajectory in terms of our policy. We've actually stopped progressing some policies that we had, that government said you must have this notified by the state. One is the highly productive land, which is bitten us on in the bottom in another area, Chris. So there are things where we have taken the accelerator off because we know there is statutory change coming, mindful that there are some fairly well-heeled groups out there that are waiting for us to put a foot wrong so that they can judicially review us. But we brought that to council and we definitely have taken a moderate approach. Plan Change 1 is further down the process of anything. So from a policy program perspective, we've taken that approach, and Chris has definitely been spearheading that, and also in the implementation. So we're really mindful of it, but we're also mindful that there are folk waiting for us to put a foot wrong, which we won't.
Thanks, Tracy. Ben.
2 things. One, Liz, great idea, and I followed up from the data you sent us through, but the economic impacts 2018, the Whangamarino Wetlands 2020, they need to be updated or ready to go. But I think the point Brent made was really significant. If you've got dollars saved and you're going to look at picking a farmer and doing a template for them and almost funding that, that would give people some certainty about how you did it, because the important point to note is that farm plans aren't necessarily going to be PC1 compliant. There's enough wrinkles in there that you could actually get it wrong. So we need PC1 compliant farm plans templated. So I'd endorse spending that money if that's if your CEO is allowing you to do that.
It's just saying we're doing that already. We're already, it's already part of Tracy's work program, because it's part of how do we support the sector already. But it's a bigger thing that we're thinking of than that. It's a bigger thing around how would we encourage others who have the same outcome that we're seeking, which is our farmers supported by really high quality farm plans, by really high quality certifiers, because that's the outcome, and find others out there that might want to join with us to support the rural sector to achieve that outcome. And maybe they're listening. I'm thinking rural banks. Or not, that creates a sustainable long-term, for the region, and that's got to be of their interest. And so if this council is in a position that it wishes to create some form of scheme which is about supporting and incentivizing outcomes, and we can sell that really well to other players out there, and then we create a coalition of the willing, maybe we could do some really good things over the next 5 years.
But like the idea that you could pay off insulation on your rates, sort of thing. You get a mechanism with banks. But the other point I was going to note is that Noel in 2023 was volunteering to be a crash test dummy for these things, and I don't think he's ever. You haven't been approached yet for a farm plan.
Yeah, it's the office is still open, but yeah, we can talk offline about that. But
Tracy's in the room. You know her. And talk with
I
her.
know who she is.
Yeah.
Look, going back to Liz's point and followed up by others, I'm probably going to tell you how to suck eggs, but the reality is our comms teams, and sometimes when I read and it's a failing of all organisations, is that those in the building know what we're talking about. And we fail at times to have a reference group that has no knowledge of whatever the hell we're talking about, and you test it on them. And then the world turns upside down because they have no idea what we're talking about. So I just encourage, when we do our comms plan, that we give it to a body of people who, one, don't have anything to do with it, and perhaps another one, which are informed, just to make sure that the language used is not confusing. Yeah, that's from experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Noel. Tracy, it's in your hands to wrap it all up.
How about I give us a karakia to finish?
That will be great.
Just before I do that, if there are any outstanding questions, if you are hearing anything out there in the community, please let us know so we can validate it, so we can respond, so we can either say, yep, that's quite right, or no, that's not right. These are the facts, not how people feel about it, because we can't correct that. But if there are facts such as, oh, you're going to need 100 more staff, come and ask us, please, because we want to correct misinformation. We can't change what people think or their philosophical responses, but the facts we really want to validate. How about I finish us with a karakia, folks? Yep. Just wait for those gentlemen to finish chatterboxing. Cool. Okay. Unuhia, mai te uri tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama tinako, te tinana, te hiningaro i te ara takatū. Koe rā i runga i whakairea aki ki runga kia tina, haumie huie tae kia. Thank you, Warren. Thanks, councillors. Not an easy topic.
No, and appreciate the way it's been handled today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to the staff for coming along. And hopefully we see